What's going on, guys? Pat here. In today's video we are finally doing a driving impression of the LS7. So it's been a little bit since I posted my last video, and that wasn't intentional. It seemed as though every issue that could go wrong with the car happened all at once. Basically the whole swap went very smooth. And in the last video you saw that we were finally firing up the car for the first time, and that was, I believe, on the 4th of July was the date that I'd actually filmed that. And here we are in early September now, and I still haven't posted any update videos on the car. And that's just because we've just been dealing with so many just weird little issues. Once we got the car fired up, I had started filming. Last you guys seen, the front clip was off the car and we literally just fired up the engine. So I was starting to film, putting the rest of the car together, buttoning up all the odds and ends, with the intention of, at the end of that video, kind of having my first driving impressions, taking the car for its first real drive, seeing how it was, seeing my reaction to it. And really, once we had gotten to the part of actually driving the car, then the issues started arising. I knew that the engine was tuned and dialed in for full throttle, and we knew we were going to have to adjust the tune once it was actually in the car, dealing with things like the actual intake air temperature under the hood, the restriction of the air filter, dealing with the clutch and the trans, all stuff, just refining it, which I knew going into it. But right off the bat I had to start making tweaks just to get it to idle, to come off idle. And it still needs some refinement, but it's like 80% of the way there now. But basically the car was undrivable at first. You go drive it and it would stall. You push a clutch in, it would stall. It wouldn't want to return to idle, things like that. And it was, quick changes, but it got to the point where I would take the car out for a little drive, come back, make a change, take it out again, things like that. And it got to the point where it really wasn't my first impression anymore, because I had already logged, like 100 miles before I even had the tune dialed in. And then we had a really big issue, which is really the reason it's taking so long to get this update video out. And it was just a very strange issue where the ECU would lose the RPM signal at 5,750 RPMs, which was very strange. We went out to do a full throttle pull. This was the week before the UMI Autocross Challenge. And so we just went out, did a pull. It went perfectly fine up till 5,750. And then it would lose the RPM signal. The engine would basically stall, stumble, take a couple of seconds to catch itself, and then it would be running fine. And there was literally no issues as long as you stayed under that RPM. So we started, going through the debugging process of what could it be. So we had replaced the camshaft position sensor. We disconnected the alternator because maybe we thought it was an electrical interference issue. We had a lot of those problems with the Sniper, and that actually made it better. It would go up to 6,400 then. So we're like, okay, maybe it's an alternator issue, but it was still happening at 6,400. So I was talking with Holly and their tech support. They sent me a new ECU under warranty. We were about to change the harness out. We were just throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick and what would fix the issue. And it was really disheartening. I missed the Autocross Challenge. I missed a lot of local events and a lot of things I wanted to do because of that issue. And lo and behold, it ended up being the crankshaft position sensor. Somehow in between when the engine was on the dyno and when it was installed in the car, that sensor went bad. It was funny, it was on like a Sunday night. They had like an off-brand, like a Duralast one in stock at a local AutoZone. So I was like, I talked to Holly, I was like, hey, can I just give this a shot to see if, it eliminates it, and then I'll order like an actual AC Delco one. So I had swapped it out. You can't see it, but it's down there by the starter under the header. And it was like a $40 sensor. Swapped it out, and lo and behold, the car pulls a very strong up tread line now with no issues. So, I mean, it was really frustrating that I missed so many events and there was all that just because of a sensor. But I mean, if anything, it gave us a chance to really go through and dial everything else on the car. And so we're slowly getting there. I'm actually filming this the week before we're going off to the Northeast Muscle Car Challenge, which is the event where we killed the 455 last year. So hopefully things will go better, but that'll be a separate video. But yeah, so it got to the point where I think we put like 300 or 400 miles on the car, and I had stopped filming at some point just because we were so focused on trying to get this resolved and get it, to the events at the end of the year. So filming kind of came second to that. So at this point, I'm pretty much scrapping the idea of doing like a first impressions video. Obviously, we're well beyond that. I have almost 500 miles on the car now. So I figured it's a good opportunity, since I've had a chance to really get, used to the car and comfortable now that we've resolved the issues, to take you guys for a drive, and we'll kind of do just a general impressions, talk about what's the good, what's the bad, and how does it compare to the 455 and the old setup now that I've been able to log some miles and really kind of comprehend this. So I'm gonna go take the car over to a local town. I'm gonna actually take it on the same loop I did in my POV video, and we'll talk about this swap and what I like about it and what I don't. Alright, so we'll see how well this picks things up, but definitely the first thing I noticed once I first started driving this is this clutch and cam combo is very tricky to get going. I think it's just because the cam doesn't really make much torque right off of idle, and also the triple disc in this thing is very light, so you can't rely on the momentum of it to get you going. You have to give this thing like 3,000 RPMs and be extremely smooth on the clutch pedal, which you'll probably see me struggle with it in this this video, but especially because this is a track-oriented clutch, as it gets hotter, it grabs harder, so you have to be even smoother and smoother as you're going along. But yeah, so we'll get going. You guys see it here, and start putting some miles on this thing. So once you get going, it's extremely smooth. I mean, honestly, over 2,000 RPMs, this thing runs better than the big block did all day long. It's pretty temperamental down low. Especially when you're trying to creep this thing around a parking lot. It wants to buck really bad, which that's going to be just kind of finding a sweet spot. I believe it's ignition timing that you need to adjust in that area. I have a good bit of timing down low, basically what the engine builder put in there. So it's super torquey down low, which will lead to that bucking, but that's also nice if you're trying to launch the car like an autocross. You want that torque down low. So, you know, we're gonna have to just kind of find a happy medium in between what works best for being, you know, in parking lots and creeping it and just kind of driving around town, and also launching for autocross. But it's really only under like 2,000 RPMs that it's an issue. Once you're above it, you're fine, and it's just super smooth. It literally feels like an OEM performance car. It's so nice. But see there, that's basically what it takes to get going smoothly in this thing now. And just like in the old big block, you do have to be cognizant about what gear you're in. You know, if you run this thing at like 1,800, 1,900 RPMs, it's really not going to be happy. It doesn't make much power down there. So the cruise RPM that I've found so far that is like the happy medium for everything's like 2,300 minimum. If you keep it there, it's low enough that it doesn't really feel like you're screaming, and it's not really loud driving around, but also it's not too low where you're bogging the engine down. But another big impression that I've had since driving this is just the car feels so much more responsive, both suspension wise with the weight over the nose, because we took about 220 pounds out of this when we weighed it, compared to the big block. And also I believe there's a 2% change, and we took 2% weight off the nose, and it definitely feels more responsive between that, the 8-to-1 steering box, and the new tires that are on it. You know, the weak point of this car before for sure was the front end push. You go turn on a road course or an autocross, and it would just want to plow through the corners because of all that weight up over the nose. But it's not really an issue now. I mean, we're gonna know for sure once we're back on the road course, but it does feel like a night and day difference. And also, it kind of hand in hand with that responsiveness is the throttle. It's just so much more responsive everywhere. You know, it wants to go at anything over 2,000 RPMs. It's right there if you need it, which is nice. With the drive-by-wire pedal on this, which is a little finicky, it is a little sensitive, and the position that it's in isn't great for someone my height. Not that I fit in this car well anyways, but you do have to be cognizant when you're getting going, or you know, if you're driving this hard and you're right on the limit of traction in a corner, you do have to feather the throttle and be really smooth with it because it's right there. You can adjust the drive-by-wire settings in the Holley EFI, but right now I just kind of have it set linear off of idle. So yeah, I don't really like throttles that are non-linear because it just feels really weird. You know, it's super lethargic and lazy down low, and then all of a sudden you get a ton of throttle coming in. So I'm probably just gonna adapt my driving style to the pedal versus trying to adapt the pedal to my driving. And this thing also revs so fast, it's crazy. You hardly have to give any throttle input to heel toe. Before, you know, you had to give it like probably 30-40% throttle to get the RPMs up, but it's definitely not the case now, which is to be expected with going to a super lightweight triple disc. The clutch that's in this is the Centerford Triad XDS, which is like their premier track clutch, and it's kind of on the limit of what I would say is a streetable clutch. You know, It's not great getting going from a stop. It's a little tricky to learn, but it is manageable. I know some people who run like 7 3/4 and 7 1/4 inch quartermaster clutches, and I can't even imagine what it's like to drive those on the street. They must not get any street miles, because even something like this is pretty difficult, and this isn't even as aggressive as that is. But as I put more miles on the car, you just kind of get used to it. It was definitely a rough first few miles getting used to the clutch setup on this car. I mean, even now I'll still stall it now and then or chirp the tires, because the problem is if you give it too much RPM and let the pedal out too quick, you're just going to spin the tires. And if you don't give it enough RPM and let it out too quick, then the thing bogs and stumbles and like hardly stays running. So you gotta get it right in that sweet spot, which I'm slowly learning. That just kind of comes with getting seat time and logging miles on the car. Because at first, when I first started driving this, I was worried that this wasn't going to be streetable at all with that clutch. But as I've been learning, it's been getting a lot better. We'll see what the longevity is. Not that I drive this on the street all the time. You know, if I could put like 2,000 miles a year on the street on it, I'd be happy. That's probably all it's ever really seen the entire time I've had it anyways. But that's the cost of setting a car up for a road course. You know, not a lot of people talk about that. When you start putting track pads in something, or you do a super lightweight clutch or a high horsepower engine like this, it starts to suck on the street. It's great on the road course, but that's such different conditions that, you know, a car that's good on the road course isn't good on the street, and a car that's good on the street isn't good on the road course. But I'm gonna shut up for a little bit and take you guys for a quick spin so you guys can kind of take in all the sights and sounds of this thing. Clutch out a little too quick and it bogged down. Thing just feels so good. And that was something I was worried about with the old setup was, you know, I redid all the steering, I redid the suspension, but like the steering feel never felt good, the throttle and the engine never felt good. And in doing this new combo, it feels so nice. It genuinely feels like a modern sports car as far as its responsiveness. You know, you turn in, it's right there. The car sets in the corner really quickly where you can feel the weight transfer and it digs in, versus before it was a lot more lethargic. Which again was probably just all the weight over the nose. Yeah, it's just, it's so hard to describe. It's just so good. And it's funny because I haven't really been beating on this thing on the street that much. When you build an engine of this caliber, you really can't use it all on the street. It's so fast that you're either, if you're in a lower gear, you're just gonna blow the tires off, and if you're in third, fourth, fifth gear, you're either gonna go to jail if you get caught, or you're gonna have a massive accident if something goes wrong. It's just, the speed on this thing is insane. You know, this car will do 60 to 120 faster than it did 0 to 60 with the big block. It's not even close. I was never genuinely terrified or impressed by the performance of this car with the old setup, but now I am. Like, I'm definitely scared to lay into this thing, and it's gonna be quite an experience when we take it on the road course next week. show too. Down there. Still getting used to this thing on hills. It's a little tricky. But I also want to talk about some of the other changes we made to the car beyond just the engine. The other big ones are going to be changing the master cylinder size out for the brakes and also the 8-to-1 steering box. I had a 12-to-1 box in the car before. I think it was like a PSC box, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. It didn't feel fast enough, and talking to people, generally the 8-to-1 is kind of like the go-to for a lot of the people that do the hardcore road racing and autocross with these cars. They say it's a little touchy on the street, but it's nice to have that turn-in, that quick ratio, especially if you're doing things like slaloms, because with a 12-to-1 on certain slalom sections, I'd have to go hand over hand, which really isn't ideal. You don't want to take your hands off the wheel to have to shuffle steer or go hand over hand or anything like that. And this 8-to-1, like, it's the real deal. It's really fast, it feels tight, it's nice. Definitely a little finicky on the street, especially with the toe out I run on my car. I believe about an 1/8 inch is what's in it right now. And part of that was to try and get better turn-in with the 12-to-1 box. And it helped with that, but it never felt great. But it's a little much now with the 8-to-1. It's very darty, so before we go to pit race, I'm definitely going to reset it back to 0. I don't think I'm going to need that toe in. And also on a road course with a lot of straights like that, you don't want that because you're going to slow yourself down with the tires pushing outwards like that. So yeah, 8-to-1 box, definitely worth it. Definitely a little touchy if you're only going to drive the car on the street, but if you're going to be autocrossing or road racing it, I could definitely say that it's worth it. Even just off feel from the street alone compared to the 12-to-1. The master cylinder on the brakes, you know, they feel good once they get temperature in them. Definitely a lot better than the old setup. I still need to get the bias dialed in. I just left it to wherever it was last year when I set it to fix that wheel hop issue. So definitely gonna need some experimenting. I think later today I'm actually gonna hook up my remote bias adjuster so I can actually like have that and not have to go out, loosen the jam nut, adjust the bar, and do that again and again and again. So slowly getting there, but the car is in a great spot. We haven't really even worked on setting up the car all that much. You know, like I have the triple adjustable coilovers in the rear, which I haven't even set or done anything with yet. But we'll see. You know, this event we're going to next week, the Northeast Muscle Car Challenge, is very much just going to be like a test and tune, so we can figure the car out, get an understanding of it, things like that. But yeah, it's slowly getting there. You know, it's not dialed in, it's not optimized, but it's looking really promising so far. You know, I'm excited to see what we can do with the car, where it ends up. In theory, it should be competitive. You know, it's got all the strong foundations for that. It's got good tires, good brakes, good power, wide tires. You know, the car is relatively light. It's about 3,400 without a driver. So we'll see where we end up. I don't want to go in with high hopes or low expectations or anything. You know, we're just going in blind to see where the car is at and start getting it dialed in really for next year. This year at this point, with all the delays and issues, has kind of been a write-off, but we'll see. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Really nothing too crazy. Just wanted to take you along for kind of a casual back road cruise and go over my impressions of the swap. You know, things that really jumped out at me as far as big differences between the old 455 setup and this one. You know, obviously I'm frustrated that it took so long to make this video, and I wish we'd had, you know, this car ready earlier in the year to make it to more events, especially like the UMI Autocross Challenge. I've been trying to make it to that event for like, I think 5 years now, and yet again failed to make it out there. But there's always next year. I say that every year and then we never make it, but hopefully next year will be different. But But yeah, it's really just going to be the Northeast Muscle Car Challenge next week, which I'll be filming our prep leading up to that event, and then I'll be filming the whole way through the event as far as in the pits, driving the car on the road course and the autocross, maybe even talking to some other people and filming their cars while I'm there. But a bit delayed as far as event coverage and actually going out and doing things, but at least we're going to be able to get this car out to some events this year. And it's really exciting because the car feels so good. It feels so responsive and well put together. And really, this is just the starting point. We're going to be doing setup work as far as like shock settings, alignments, even changing a little miscellaneous things, and really dialing this thing in. So I'm excited for what we can do with the car the rest of the year. But more importantly, going into next year, we're not really going to be doing any big changes this winter. So we're just going to have the car ready to go. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next one, where hopefully we can redeem ourselves at the Northeast Muscle Car Challenge. Last year, we had nothing but problems with the 455, which is what prompted this whole LS swap in the first place. But yeah, we'll see. I don't want to say anything and have any expectations. Just going to go in open-minded and see what we can do with the car. So I'll see you guys in the next one.